Hello, everybody, and happy Friday. Welcome to the Art of Inspired Selling, where I am the host, Catherine Evans Nunez, and I interview unique people in my network that are doing wonderful things in the new normal. So not only are they successful, but they are successful in this new normal. And I am super privileged today to bring on one of my clients who's become one of my favorite people. But one of the reasons I'm bringing on my guest, Tristan Higgins, today is, as you know, in our social selling strategy, the first part that we talk about is creating a compelling digital personal brand. And when you develop a compelling digital personal brand, you know what you stand for in this world and what you stand against. And Tristan has done an excellent job in this, in her life, understanding what she stands for, understanding what she stands against, and understanding those people that she's going to fight for and fight for the rights of those people. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring on Tristan, because when you're talking about creating that compelling digital footprint and pulling your people in, you've got to be authentic and you've got to stand for something in this world. So before I bring Tristan on, as always, I'm going to read her bio. So Tristan E.H. Higgins, don't let me forget that, Tristan. I forget about why asking people about their initials and stuff. She's a highly trained and internationally recognized speaker on diversity and inclusion. She speaks with humor and sincerity, which allows her to reach audiences of any age, nationality, and profession. She founded Metaclusive LLC to help organizations shift their focus to belonging. Tristan has a Bachelor of Arts in Theater from the University of California, San Diego, and went to California Western School of Law. She began her career as a prosecutor for the San Diego City Attorney and went on to practice entertainment law. And here's some acronyms: SAG, AFTRA, you're going to have to explain that as well, in Los Angeles. After advising this company in video game contract negotiations, she joined Sega of America in San Francisco, where she oversaw Sega's legal needs for North America. Tristan lives with her wife, 2 kids, 1 dog, and 3 cats who we might see grace the screen. We're not quite sure about that. In her pre-pandemic spare time, she served the community as a volunteer DJ for not-profit events and traveled the world as often as possible. Now she's trying to make the world a better place for her home, from her home, and hoping she doesn't forget how to socialize. Okay. I don't know if the reason I can't read that is I'm tired. I've been up since 3:30, but I apologize, Tristan, for chopping that up. Let me bring you on the stage. Here you are.
Hi there.
It's been an early morning for me, and no apologies here. We got through it, and I'm super happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Hooray!
Yay. Yes, so it's Friday, people. Let's see what you got in the chat. We want to hear your comments, your questions. Tristan is a diversity and inclusion specialist. She does breakout groups. She does speaking. She does consulting. She does roadmaps for people. She's here to provide that information to you, or even talk to you if you are having questions about diversity or inclusion, right? Because I don't think she says no to helping anyone understand this topic that she's so passionate about.
That's right. I don't want to say no to anybody. I'm really excited to be here, Catherine. Thank you for that introduction, albeit slightly staggered, and I'm honored.
Let me ask a question, because we have a little delay. We have Jenny Michaels on Facebook commenting. Jenny, let me ask you, when Tristan talks, is there any feedback? Tristan, why don't you sing like your favorite song?
The hills are alive. Any feedback, Jenny?
Because it was we had some sound. I don't know. She's not saying anything. All right. She said, yes, there's a lot of feedback. So I don't know what we can do on the mic of that. But while Tristan's looking at that, I'm going to ask you, Tristan, one of the, and if you need to exit and come back on the show, we can do that. Nobody's going to go anywhere. Lots of feedback. Jenny, is the feedback just from me, or is it from, I'm sorry, is it just from Tristan, or is it from me as well? Let's see what's going on. Because, you know, Tristan and I can break downs too. So whatever we need to do to pass the time to make sure where the feedback is coming from.
I can do impressions. Is that any better? I turned the volume down, but
just Tristan. Tristan, why don't you exit and come back in and see if that helps at all?
Okay.
And I'll hold your space and maybe do my best. I don't know what kind of impression, but Tristan's been working with me as a client, and I'm just so happy to watch her her professionalism. She's so articulate, and I can't wait to see her on some of these stages that when we're back from this pandemic, getting out into the speaking world. But you know, one thing I want to remind you guys is when you are going on podcasts or live shows or whatever, you know what? Don't be afraid if things fall apart a little bit and you have some technical difficulties, because we just roll with the punches, and the most important thing is to show up and represent. And let's see when she comes back on if there is no feedback. Let's see. Well, how about while we're waiting for her, we'll talk about what I worked on. So today I worked on my inbound. Oh, here she is. She saved me by the bell. Let's see.
Sorry, is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so much for the microphone. I and just using these now, so hopefully that helps. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We're here. All right. Here we go. So Tristan, as a guest, I always ask people, this is the art of inspired selling. What inspires you to get up and do what you do? You know, you're really in the limelight right now with diversity and inclusion and politics and Black Lives Matter and everything that's happening. You're at the forefront of that. You know, tell me what inspires you to get up and just to, you know, since I know you're a comic book hero, like throw some Wonder Woman things out there. What inspires you to continue to do that?
Well, I think that for me, the biggest thing is just knowing that there is this need, and this is something that I've always been able to help people with. For many years, more than 2 decades, I was a corporate entertainment lawyer. By the way, SAG-AFTRA, that's SAG-AFTRA, Screen Actors Guild, up in LA. People may have heard of them. And I've done this for as long as I can remember. I've been fighting for fairness. I've been fighting for equality and equity in ways without really understanding what the concepts meant. And so now there's a need for that more than ever. And just because I've only recently learned how badly we need that, you know, doesn't change the need. And so every morning I get up and I think, first of all, oh my gosh, you know, I need to keep hustling. And what can I do? And right now I can talk about white privilege. I can continue to talk about gender identity and gender expression, things that a lot of people don't understand. And I think one of the things that helps me do that as far as a superhero power is I'm hard to offend. And I generally have a pretty good sense of humor. And so I think that helps people a lot when they are worrying about, oh my gosh, saying the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. Do I say Black? Do I say African-American? You know, do I say gay? Do I say LGBT? Is it LGBT? Is it LGBTQ plus? Is it right? And so having that sort of down to earth, I guess just down to earth, approachable status really is helping me to make changes. And that's what gets me excited.
Okay. So before I forget, what does EH stand for?
So it's Elizabeth Harper.
Okay. Oh, I'm Elizabeth as well. See, we're just
I love that.
two Lizzies in the group here. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So yes, Tristan Elizabeth Harper Higgins. That's such a royal name right there. I'm telling you.
Thank you. Well, my wife was kind enough to take my name, Higgins, and so I decided to add her name as my second middle name, and that's Harper. So,
see,
yes.
There you are with that inclusion thing. You know,
That's right.
You're living it.
That's right.
So, what What even made you want to go into law?
Well, I wanted to go into law because I had a very traumatic personal experience that required a lawyer. I had a bad accident, and I used my family's lawyer at the time, and he ended up being a white knight. Before that, I had not really seen any positive images of lawyers, and he was this wonderful man, and he really changed my view. And on top of that, when I first sat down with him, I was, what was I, 20, 21, 20, and I negotiated his rate. And he said to me, gosh, most people don't negotiate my rate, let alone, young adults. And maybe you should be a lawyer. Bing, that was the thing. And, I started talking to my friends and family. And of course, my mother said, well, you love to argue, right? So that was the genesis. And I got to it by way of entertainment law, because at that time I was, hell bent on becoming a director. And, I was working on my theater passion and just loved it. And I thought, oh my gosh, even if I'm a successful director in theater, I will be out of work every 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And
we don't know, or it could be like a year in 2020.
That's right. That's right. And I thought, wow, I want to have a family, and that just doesn't feel like a good approach. Plus, I did not like to audition. And so I thought, all right, maybe I could do entertainment law. And that's really, that's, I guess, short story long. That's how I became an entertainment lawyer. And that morphed into corporate, high-tech, transactional law right from the beginning. I mean, I started as a prosecutor, and I loved that, learned a lot about trial, and was able to teach some of my colleagues about theater and using those skills on the floor.
Imagine, right? What a great combination.
Oh, thank you. I mean, the problem is, juries are sophisticated, right? They expect law and order. They expect Criminal Minds. They expect this, sort of, and what did you see next, Mr. Smith? This very dramatic approach. And that's just not how it is. And so one of the things that's important for successful attorneys, regardless of whether you're prosecutors, defense attorneys, or private attorneys, is to be able to keep an audience engaged. And so that was one way that I was able to keep my passion, my pre-law school passion, after doing law, finishing law school. And so, then I was able to get into entertainment law, working at the Screen Actors Guild up in LA. Shout out to them. Since then, they've merged with their fellow organization, which was AFTRA. And now they're the powerhouse. And I worked there for many years and just loved it. And then I left to go to Sega, the video game company. I think a lot of people know who they are. Maybe not so much the millennials, but they do Sonic, in case anybody's curious. And really just had fun up in San Francisco, ran their legal team for North America, and then needed to come back and was excited to find an opportunity back in San Diego with Sony Electronics. And I was able to do their digital cinema rollout. So for the kids on our meeting, it used to be when you played charades, you would do this for film, because film came in these giant canisters. And now it doesn't do that. It's in these giant computers that are the sizes of refrigerators. And I got to help Sony with that rollout. And then morphed to things like robotics and drones and artificial intelligence. And I just had such an amazing experience learning about semiconductors and all of this artificial intelligence and things like that. And, just kind of morphed throughout my career. But always have been an entertainment lawyer.
It sounds fun. Absolutely. Yes. And so now you've landed on stage and consulting.
That's right.
And the key
Full
speaker
circle.
on Zoom. So you're back, you're back with your theatrics, right? Because stage presence is so important. I'm sure. How have you brought that training that you had when you're speaking on stage? Do you because when I've seen you speak, you're very calm, you're very articulate, and we don't talk about what happens when the camera turns off, right? But do you feel that your training has brought that stage presence for being calm on stage? Do you employ any of your training in that?
Oh, for sure. And when you say calm, I don't know that I'm calm on stage, but maybe collected, right? Because you need to have a lot of energy to be on stage, just like you have when you run these amazing chats. And I think when I am on stage, really the only difference Well, there's a couple differences, of course. When you're on stage, most people are looking at you
Mhm.
or their phones, and then back and forth. And us theater people, we like that, right? We like to be the center of attention, and so when you're not on stage, it's important to learn how to share that. So we can talk about that over drinks, but um, I think what's important on stage is to be who you are when you're not on stage. And I am funny, and I try to share stories about myself that are embarrassing because there's so many of them to choose from, and that helps people to relate. And it's just, you're not performing. Now I'm not performing. Before, I would take a character or I would be doing a play of some sort, but now it's just me and I'm talking to people about what's real. And in some ways that's scarier, but in other ways it's easier because I know this stuff, right? I mean, I'm
Right.
always learning, but I'm not up there trying to explain theories that I don't understand, if that makes sense.
For me, it does. And I hope for you as the audience, it makes sense to you too. So now let's branch over into Metaclusive, which,
Okay.
and I put that in the show notes, but tell us just a short story about how you pivoted from the legal world to
Mhm.
now the diversity and inclusion that you're doing. Was there a pivotal moment that made you say, listen, if somebody's not going to fight for those rights, I'm the one that's going to do it? Like, what was it that caused you to say, I'm done with the corporate America and now I'm going to go out and make a difference and be a trailblazer in the world?
Wow. Well, I'm not done with corporate America because those are my favorite clients. So please don't feel offended, corporate America. I had a medical crisis basically. And I ended up being home for quite a long time. And while I was home, I thought, wow, do I want to go back into the same place that I was, back into corporate law, or do I want to do something different? And, I have been lucky enough to be employed my entire adult life. And I never had that moment, that reevaluation, that opportunity to pivot, like so many people have had with the virus and the pandemic. But I thought, what do I want to do? And I was talking to a career expert, and she said to me, well, if you could do anything in the world right, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask people, if you could do anything in the world right now, what would it be? And I said, I would be speaking on stage. I would be a professional speaker. That is what I would be doing. And she said to me, the simplest question, well, why don't you do that? And I thought, boom, it was another one of those moments. And I thought, well, maybe I will do that.
I had goosebumps, right? Because
Oh, thank you.
but as simple as that statement is, right? People say, "Oh, yeah. If I could, I would. If I could, or if you just wait." And then if you just like take away all the obstacles, and then you just like go, "Oh, well, I actually can do that." Right?
That's
it's
right.
just really
That's
a simple choice, right? It's a choice to make.
And it was a very natural thing that in order to be speaking, that what I would be doing is helping people with all the stuff that I've been doing, for free, as it were, for most of my career. And diversity and inclusion has been my passion since, like I said, since I can remember. And certainly since I was in the legal field, I've been helping bring employee resource groups and helping bring a focus on the LGBTQ plus community to all the different companies I've worked for. And when I started looking into the space, and I thought, okay, diversity and inclusion, a lot of people talk about diversity and inclusion, and all the best minds are really moving towards the concept of belonging. And so I did my research, and what do I want to do, and who's doing it better, and what how do I position myself? What makes me different? And I thought, well, I need to focus on belonging, because the concept of belonging affects absolutely everyone, right? 100% of the people listening to this right now, however few or however many there are, want to belong. I've never been in a situation where I thought, oh, I don't want to belong. Well, maybe prison. But other than that, when you walk into a room, you want to feel like you belong. And the wonderful thing about talking about belonging is it brings in our straight white friends, right? Our straight white male friends who so frequently feel excluded from this conversation about diversity and inclusion. And so when I thought, okay, well, how do I embody this concept? I took my geekiness, superhero fanaticism, and my wife's science passion. She's a marine biologist. And I thought, well, I like the word meta. Meta is, meta-human, metadata, and I wanted to bring those together. And I came up with the idea of Metaclusive. And the reason that I made up a word is a super practical one. As a lawyer, right? I can trademark it, and I don't have to pay Google to find me, you can go and type Metaclusive right now, and I will be the first thing that comes up. So really, the concept of Metaclusive, that's the practical aspect, but is that it's a workplace beyond diversity and inclusion, where that, it's really transcends that, where everyone feels like they're represented, they're accepted, and they're valued. And really, that's just a fancy way of saying they belong.
And 2020, we are here. We are now. The poor U.S., the poor world, has had to face so many things that they thought they could just turn a blind eye to, right, for forever.
Yes.
And there's, we're in California. We're in Southern California, but there's Midwest. There's the South. There's people that they don't want to talk about gay rights. They don't want to talk about Black Lives Matter. They do, but in 2020, it's front, center, and in their face. Mm-hmm. And so tell me about what is one of the largest problems that corporate America is bringing to you today that you're actually able to help them on. Like, people right now are thinking about people, right? They're mm-hmm. thinking about the people marketing in the street. They're thinking about me and you, about our friends. How are we going to handle this? They're not so much thinking about big corporate America, about how all those problems get rolled up and put under one roof. What would you say is the largest, maybe the top two problems that you're faced with when you go in to consult with somebody, or that corporate America is bringing up today that you are helping them solve?
All right, I can categorize that, I think, in two categories.
Okay.
The first one is, Tristan, help. We know that diversity is important. We already believe all of the numbers. We understand that we need to do something because we feel very diverse, but then when we look around, our workplace is not as diverse as we think it is. Can you help us get started? So that's sort of the first level of category of client. Mm-hmm. We know it's important. We need your help, or somebody like me's help, in order to create a more diverse and inclusive workspace. The second really type of client is, we are losing our employees to companies that are more diverse and inclusive than we are, right? Of course, we have situations that involve lawsuits or bad press, but just generally speaking, you spend a lot of time and money training your employees. They are the most valuable resource. You are fully committed to them as far as cost and resource allocation, but are they fully committed to you? And that's one of the things that's really important, because if people don't feel like they belong, they will go somewhere else. And until they find some place where they belong, they might keep moving. And the last thing you want to do is train your competition, right? Yeah. You train up your people, they're amazing, and then they leave. And they bring their wonderful diverseness to another place. And then that diverseness attracts more diverseness. And so you as a company are falling further and further behind in that sort of race to the top. We know there's a lot of stats I won't break out on our viewers right now, but we know that diversity and inclusion and belonging drive innovation. They drive profit. They reduce costs. They reduce sick days. They increase, performance in people, allowing you to get more done. And so if you aren't focused on this, certainly even before 2020, this was true, but now everybody knows it's true, and they are, falling over themselves to put up the place card or the post on Facebook and social media that's all black and it has white letters, right? They want to show that they are supportive, but people are starting to say, and have been saying, now what? What are you doing now? What's behind that place card? That's pretty, but it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't help me to get a better paying job. It doesn't help me to get out of my food desert. It doesn't help me to be in this situation where, I have relatives that are much more likely to go to jail in my lifetime, right? Like it doesn't help any of those things. And so corporations sometimes need people like me to come in and help them to make sure that it's not, we use the word performative, that they're not just demonstrating. Here we are, we're very supportive. Okay, yeah. Now back to business as usual, right? So
right, yeah. Sign the paper on my door on the clipboard, and we'll talk about it when I have right. Time in my schedule. Now, here's a question I'm going to ask, because I personally have experienced this more than once. So, white male, says to me, what is it with you and women? Right? Somebody in the workplace. And so, because as you guys know, as my audience might know, I support women in sales. I mentor women entrepreneurs. I mentor women in sales through the National Association of Women Sales Professionals. I am passionate about empowering women because as I was growing through my career, I didn't have women supporters. I had women competitors. I had women managers, but I did not have women mentors or supporters. So I decided that I would be that person I was looking for because, right, isn't that be the change you want to see?
Yes.
And so when a man says to me, what is it with you and women anyway? So what would you suggest to HR? How would you, what would you do with that kind of a culture? What would you say? What would be some things if the employees did a survey and they said, we're hearing these kind of comments. What are some words or some tools that I can use to articulate back my response to that?
Well, I think that the first thing that's important is when you hear comments like that, it is most likely, in my experience, that the person who's saying them doesn't understand that there's a problem. And the reason they don't understand there's a problem is because they approach the world from their own view, which is what we all do, right? We all approach the world from our own particular lens and our viewpoint. And if, as a white woman, I do identify as a woman, by the way, I should have said my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I don't have any idea what it's like to be Black. I don't have any idea what it's like to be Latinx, and I don't have any idea what it's like to be a man, right? I have my own lens. And so when we are talking to people that make comments like that, I think the most important thing I would encourage the employees to do is to assume the best, right? Assume the best. Assume that this person is just coming from a place of ignorance and not in a judgmental way, just in that they just don't know the true definition of the word. And so the first thing is we need some education. Now, education isn't going to fix diversity and inclusion, but it does point out that there's a problem. Now, we could sit around and talk about the fact that if you don't know there's a problem today, that's probably could be intentional. And so if you put on these blinders, then we need to understand how to take those off. And so the first thing is you need to have a meeting of some sort. People need to come up with common dialogue. We can share experiences. We can share statistics. It's very helpful to have somebody come in from outside to facilitate that kind of dialogue. But I think you really need to start looking at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. And, men love numbers, right? In my experience. And the men who are running companies are really good at numbers. And so we talk about numbers. We talk about, we talk about the wage gap. We talk about the mommy track. We talk about, women getting interrupted, women not getting these, it really, we have to talk about implicit bias, right? Maybe not now, but in that environment.
Why don't you define that? Why don't you define that for us? Because I have to admit, in my young age, that I only within the past 4 or 5 years even understood what the word meant of unconscious bias. So let's talk about implicit bias, and then maybe you can even define unconscious bias.
Sure. So I can do them both. Well, unconscious bias really implies, or it refers to the set of beliefs and understandings that we all have, all humans have, that are baked into us. They're part of us, and there's nothing we can do about the fact that they're there. That is unconscious bias. That's what we used to refer to it as, because the idea is you didn't look at a Black person and think, I'm going to be afraid of this person. You didn't look at a person in a wheelchair and think that person is lesser than me. You never did that. You never had that sort of comment to yourself. It's unconscious. It's baked in. It's based on your parents. It's based on media. It's based on everything that you experience. Now, we've moved to talking about implicit bias because the idea is, the first thing is you become aware of it. Now it's no longer unconscious, right? It's conscious bias. But conscious bias doesn't sound very good because it sounds like I'm intentionally making these efforts every day to keep people down. So when we talk about implicit bias, the idea is I have these beliefs. They come with me. Every time I come into a room, I bring all of my implicit biases with me. And as an educated, trying to be evolved human, what I need to do is figure out how to address those and practice bias interruption. And there's a lot of wonderful resources for that. I'd love for you to talk to me, but you don't have to. There's amazing resources on this available online that will help you. I'll give you one good example. Can I give a good example?
Yeah. And I can even type something in the chat to give it out to people.
Well, it's better than a bad example, I suppose. But one really good example is if you, there were there was the symphony. There was a symphony example. There weren't enough women in the symphony. And the people who ran the symphony believed, once they started talking about it, that men were better musicians. Now, they didn't realize that until they started talking about it. And so that's not a belief that just goes away because you hear an amazing violinist, right? So what they undertook was blind auditions. The people would audition behind a curtain, and the listeners were there. And it turned out that pretty much erased the distinction between men and women as excellent symphony performers. And so that's what we talk about when we talk about bias interruption. It's still there, but you found a way to kind of short circuit your brain so that you're not relying on that previously unconscious bias.
That's a great example. All right, so now I'm going to throw you another curveball I've heard in my corporate life, and it is, my statement is, we need to have more women in sales, right? So I help women in male-dominated industries where there's maybe 5% of the sales force is women, and then 95% is men. And so the hiring manager's response to that is, we just hire the best person. You know, I don't intentionally hire women. I don't see a need for it. I just hire the best person. So what is a good statistical number, or how would you approach that? Because, you know, there's a lot of women right now, and there's a lot of women out of work looking for jobs, but I don't want to discount men, because I would also say that there's men that want to work in diverse and inclusive environments as well. Absolutely. So that's just a question, right? What percentage of men do you have in sales? What percentage of women do you have in sales? Those are questions and statistics that aware people are starting to ask now. But when the hiring manager just says, well, we just hire the best people. So what would be something that you could teach someone to ask, or how would you coach a sales manager on that topic? Or it doesn't have to be sales, right? That's just where I'm coming from. It could be anything. Right.
Well, I think that, the first question I would ask is, that's the best person for what? Is that the best person to reach the audience you've already always are reaching with your 95% male sales force? Because if you want to reach 51% of the population, which translates to 51% of the working people perhaps, then maybe it's actually better that you hire a woman, and that is an incremental improvement. For example, somebody has a PhD, somebody else doesn't have any high school education. For some jobs, that makes a difference. For other jobs, it doesn't. So I think it's very important to remember that our audience for sales is increasingly becoming diversified. I would imagine that 95% of the people that you are helping your clients sell to are not men. So why are 95% of the salespeople men? And so the first thing is to kind of open up our definition and our broadening our understanding of what we're looking for. Sometimes, I would say that some of the biases involved in the salesperson are, well, I need somebody who can travel a lot. I need somebody who is really okay with drinking late at night and who can entertain clients, and women just aren't comfortable doing that. Well, first of all, that's not true, right? I mean, that's a ridiculous stereotype.
Not if you know me.
Right. Well, that's a ridiculous stereotype. Right. It's based on old-fashioned ideas. And, certainly there are some women who don't like to do those things, but there are also men who don't like to do those things. And not even to mention, it's probably too big for today, but there's more than just men and women, genders, right? But for now, we'll just focus on that. And I think the idea that, when you start to talk about this concept of just hire the best person for the job, it ties in very much with what I hear. We have a pipeline problem. That's what people say a lot. It's a pipeline problem, Tristan. I can't hire a woman general counsel because there's just not enough women attorneys that are qualified. And I think that, first of all, I don't like it when people say that, and I'm never not nice to them when they say it in front of me. But the idea that there's a pipeline problem to me really says you have a problem in your recruitment. Right. So, you may not be able to today have somebody on your staff who is able to fill the role as a woman GC, but you certainly can go find someone who is from outside of your corporation. What efforts are you making to fix your perceived pipeline problem? Are you recruiting in diverse areas? Are you recruiting at historically Black universities? Are you recruiting at events for the veterans and disabled people, right? So that's,
I think there's a word, right? There's a word we're missing here, which is intentional, right? Are you being intentional, or are you just not addressing it? Like, are you intentionally creating a diverse workplace? Or are you just taking the easy street and just hiring whose resume shows up on your desk? Because if you're not taking the intentional route, then this is the result.
That's right. That's right. And I think the thing to remember is the status quo is easy, right? Even if it's uncomfortable because you don't like what it is, it's still easy because it requires the least amount of effort. And just like the idea that teams that are exactly the same, they function the easiest, right? If there's a bunch of people just like me and we get to talk and we work together every day, we have exactly the same sense of humor, we like the same food, we have the same movie references, that's going to be really, really easy. But what else is it going to be? Super narrow, right? We aren't going to be able to reach anybody in whatever it is that we're doing that isn't just like us, right? I like to make the example that leagues of superheroes, back to my superhero fanaticism, are very different. The Hall of Justice only has one Wonder Woman and one Superman. They have different powers. You have Aquaman. He's got different powers from the other two. Of course, they're all strong, but they're all different. There's only one speedy person. There's only one person who can turn invisible. And that means that they can handle problems in water, in air, et cetera, et cetera. And if you have a bunch of Supermen or super women, Wonder Women, Supergirls, they can only handle a certain kind of problem. Now, they might be great at it, but it's still very narrow and very linear. And so what I do think intentional is important. And I think it's important to remember that just like free speech, which is hard, right? Because that means you and I can say the exact opposite of each other. We both have the right to say it. That's the same thing with diversity. It's incredibly important. It will drive your business and it will take a little more effort, but it will be worth it.
All right, so we have 20 minutes, and
Okay.
we did log in a little late, but I want to bring some slides on, and for those of you that are listening versus watching, I'm bringing on Tristan's a few of her slide deck, and we will make that available to you guys in a public folder. So let's talk a little bit about your slides. You just tell me when to move, and I'll be your Vanna today.
Oh, wonderful. Well, just go to the next one because that's just, the first one is, and I think we already talked about metaclusivity. So let's go to the next one. And what we're going to talk about is the difference between equity and equality. And I think this will tie right back into our pipeline and our best person for the job discussion. So equality and equity are really different concepts. And people, I talk to a lot of people, very educated people who don't really have a grasp of this. And so that's okay. Let's talk about what's the difference, right? So let's go to the next slide. So this is normally a little bit longer, but I squished all of these onto just a couple slides to make it easier for today. So when we look at equality, right? Equality is the concept. We love that, right? Everybody wants to be equal. Everybody starts at the same place. Everybody has the same access to resources, and everybody's shooting for the same goal. So if you look at the drawing in the upper left-hand corner, you have 3 different people, all appear to be able-bodied. They're all starting on level ground, and they all have exactly the same ladder to get them to the same goal. That's equality. So let's talk about inequality, right? Inequality is the absence of equality, and that is in the next drawing there on the upper right. What we have here is we have 2 people who have blocks that they're standing on that give them literally a leg up, right? They are further along the ladder.
And let me just describe those blocks for those people to be inclusive of somebody that might not be able to see our slides, is that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rainbow colored blocks, right? So it's giving this person on the far left, they're starting from a different place, right? They're starting with a leg up, if you will.
It's like they have a step stool that helps them get onto the ladder, right? And then we have another type of person who's actually starting in a hole. So the ground is level, but there's a big hole, and this person who still is able-bodied is in the hole trying to get up that ladder. And then finally, we have a person in a wheelchair who the ladder is over their head. They can't reach it, right? Now that's inequality. The idea of inequality, that we have different starting points, that we have they're still the same resources. I'm just going to look at my drawing a little bit, and that we have the same goal. Now, inequality, it's important to remember for those of us that may be on the stepping blocks on the left, it's not your fault, right? I like to remind people of this because I think what happens so often is we get defensive whenever we talk about racism or sexism or homophobia. We really kind of say, well, I'm not racist. And we can talk later about whether that's true or not. But the reality is I'm not trying to blame you for whatever problem I have. So when we look at the two characters on the drawing who are on the step stools, it's important to remember that they didn't do the building of those step stools, but they still were built by someone hundreds of years ago. And they are benefiting from access to what was built. Now, when we talk about the picture, what does it really look like? It's not just inequality, because we also have systemic racism and we have bias. And so what that does to the picture is it makes the ladder for the person who's in the hole basically broken into 3 different pieces. And they have to try to figure out how to navigate up through a broken ladder. Now, some people can do it, but it is much harder, right? Mm-hmm. They're starting in a hole. They're trying to climb a broken ladder. And then you have our friend there in the wheelchair whose ladder doesn't even have the same number of rungs, right? That's what we're talking about when we use an example of systemic racism and bias. Again, please remember that the 2 people who are on the rainbow blocks, they didn't break the ladder. They didn't do that to the other people. I think that's really, really important to remember, and maybe a little bit comforting as a white person, because that's, I could feel pretty bad all the time if I think about, whether, well, I do because of what's happening, but I didn't build the system that we have now. Now, I benefit from the system that we have now. And so that's why we go through this exercise. If you go to the next slide. So when we talk about diversity is a great concept, but naked diversity alone, all it does is add more people to a system that's already broken and already unequal. So in this drawing, what we have is we have our two people that are climbing the ladder, and then we have our broken ladder with the people in the hole, and there's another 5 or 6 people around that person waiting to get access to the broken ladder. And now we have an older person with a cane or a younger person with a cane next to the wheelchair. Nothing has made it easier for them to advance. All that happens is they're looking at the ladders. So we don't want to just talk about diversity by itself, because that really doesn't help anything. Now we've already covered the upper right-hand slide there. So I'm just going to go to equity. So now what's equity? Now this is my favorite. So in an equitable situation, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the person who was in the hole with a broken ladder and the person who was in the wheelchair with a colleague in the cane that can't reach the ladder. What we're going to do is we're going to reallocate resources from the first, we're going to reallocate resources that we are already spending to fix the ladder that we see, to fill the hole that's in the ground, and to install an elevator for our friends in the wheelchair and the cane. Now, please remember, everybody can use the elevator, right? These are not exclusive, but they need the elevator in order to climb that ladder. Now, the idea behind equity is you're not spending resources the same, right? Because the people who are on the left, on the blocks, they don't need any resources to climb their ladder. The people who need the resources are the people who get it. Now, that is the difference between equality and equity. Now, I like to, let's go to the next slide and we'll kind of draw it out. The next one, actually. Okay. Yes, this is the one. This is the magic slide. So here's the idea that equity can address privilege. Equity can address these inequalities that come from privilege and bias, right? So you've got your 2 people who are still busy climbing their ladder. They don't need our help. Maybe they do because somebody has a little more money than someone else, or somebody's family is a little more connected. But generally speaking, they started from basically the same place and basically the same ladder, right? We're not trying to fix that. We're not trying to make everyone have the same amount of money. We're just trying to give people access that lets them climb that ladder. So in this drawing, we've got the resources coming in. We've got the truck, the bucket truck there that's fixing the ladder, filling the hole, and we have the lift being installed. So this is really the concept of equity and what we want to move towards. Now, at some point, this won't be necessary, right? You'll have maybe a few blocks for some people, but you'll have ladders, there'll be no hole, and people can, keep moving. But in the meantime, we need to divert resources to help people who are not able to climb the ladder in the way that everyone else is.
And that's interesting because the people, we'll just call them people, that say, why do you need the Women's March? Or why do you need a day? Or why do you need something? They don't quite understand that need to divert funds, right? Or to divert attention, because they are potentially sitting in that privileged area where they're saying, well, why don't I get more money? Maybe I need something more, why is it always about you guys? And so this diagram and your talk track helps people walk through that and to understand a little bit more how that would equal the playing field.
Yes. And it may be that in the people you listed in your example, they do need help, right? But we're talking about system-wide. Right? Not every able-bodied straight white person is killing it, right? They're just not. But what we're talking about here is systems that have been built in a way that disadvantages some and advantages others. And I love the example from the show Friends years ago when Ross was arguing that there was, why did they have to have 2 Mother's Days for his baby mother's partner? Okay. I don't suppose you can edit this out. So, the concept is, well, there's no lesbian lover day. And Ross's comment was, every day is lesbian lover day because he's no longer part of that baby's life, right? So, the whole world is built in a way, at least in America, that favor the people who built it, which 400 years ago was, land owning white men, straight or not. And a couple hundred years later was industrial, owning white men. And so they are not evil by any means. They're not the problem. What we're trying to do is remember that when the system that we have now was put into place, that's who was in the workforce. And now we have different people in the workforce, and we have an ever diversifying population and an ever diversifying world market that's becoming closer and closer. And in order to stay competitive, you have to diversify as well.
That's all great message. So let's go. This is your last slide here.
Yep, that's just the last one. That's just bringing home that superhero comic book reference. But yeah,
we love that superhero thing. It fits you so well. All right, so tell me a little bit if this is going to be repositioned. So tell anyone, who's your target? Like, how big of a company? Are you looking to work with larger companies, smaller companies, legal companies? Who's your niche that you could fill your pipeline with day in and day out?
Thank you. What a great question.
Just because I'm that strategic prospecting coach you have there.
I love that. Helping me to sell. Well, I think mid-sized companies really are my main target for the building work, the helping them from scratch. I love to work for companies like Sony, Google, Apple, but they already have these strategies. So they need more help. Maybe they might need a keynote speaker, or they might want some interesting insight. But when it comes to people who really need to build this, we're looking at smaller to mid-sized companies, universities, large nonprofits, things like groups like that. That would really be my sort of go-to.
Okay, your target market, your target prospect. I learned on the SEO.
My client avatars.
Yes, our buyer persona. Okay,
That's
and so Metaclusive.com. Right, is your website.
Yes,
and
Metaclusive everywhere.
Okay.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, because it's a made up word, so I got it.
Yeah. And she's on LinkedIn, peeps.
I am on LinkedIn.
She's on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And so people can just email you. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
So emailing me is the best way. You can reach me at Tristan@metaclusive.com, which is Tristan @Metaclusive, METACLUSIVE.com.
And it's in the chat. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. It's almost like it's magic. And I'm here in San Diego, but I am available to do work worldwide. But just if you're, time zone wise, I'm in San Diego, and my website is available. You can contact me via the website if you want to use a contact form or a speaker request form. There's some information there that you can tackle.
Okay. Well, Tristan, I want to thank you so much for being live with me today on the Art of Inspired Selling. You've done a wonderful job of helping people out. And, you're so easy to talk to be able to understand and talk through some of these things, because we may be adults, but we still may not know how to talk about these subjects, right? And we also have to be able to talk about these subjects with our children, because our children are the future of tomorrow. And, once again, we live in a little bit of a bubble in San Diego where kids don't even care, right? They don't, or at least in our schools, they don't see, I have to quit saying they don't see color. Color doesn't matter to them. Gender doesn't matter to them. At least not in my household. So,
well, I can say, I have a 13-year-old boy, and he is, he's the epitome, I think, of a straight white male, right? And so I've been working on him since he was little. But he said to me recently, "Mom, do I have to use X word instead of Y word?" And I said, "No, you don't have to, but you do need to be aware that when you say X, it's going to hit some people this way. And so you want to be conscious, and you want to intentionally offend people rather than unintentionally offend them."
Tammy Hawkins says, "Amazing today. Thank you." Thank you, Tammy, for showing up and being here. Jenny says, "Most excellent message, friend." Thank you so much, Jenny, for being here as well. And, Jenny is in the education system. So that might be somebody that you can talk up to as well, as far as helping teachers and educators be more diverse, inclusive, because they have our younger generation, right? And how they handle that. I'm sure there's training like that in there. But anyway, next week we will be back. Same bat channel, right? So how does that go? Same bat cave, same bat channel?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and also, in case you guys missed it, Tristan and I were both nominated by NABO San Diego for the Brava Award for a Rising Star. So if you guys would like to join us on October 23rd, where they announce the winner of that award, we both will be cheering each other on, because no matter who wins, we all win. We win. Right.
Catherine wins.
Let's go that way.
Catherine wins.
So we will be there cheering each other on. I love having you as a client, Tristan. Best of luck to you, you guys. We will see you soon. Thank you once again for tuning in. And we're here if you have any topics that you'd love to have brought to light. Personal branding, target market analysis, social selling. You know that I am here. My team is here to support you in any way that we can. Have a fabulous day. Tristan, stay on. We'll be right back with you.